Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. Let's start the discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. In the Delhi edition of the Hindu, we have 10 important articles. There are a couple of articles related to the developments in Nepal and how India should cultivate better ties with the new Nepalese government. We also have an article on the CAPF bill. I'm not taking those two articles because we have already covered those topics repeatedly. So let's focus on these 10 articles in today's paper and cover them comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. But before we start, I have a couple of important announcements. If you're looking to enroll for our online classes, this would be the perfect opportunity as Unacademy is providing a flat 60% off on the subscription. You can now avail a subscription at just 16,999 and also get up to 6 months of free extension. I'm told this offer will end tomorrow, and those interested can click on the link provided in the video description below. On the subscription page, you might find a different price, but to avail the offer, you have to enter the code IAS English. The second important announcement is with regard to Conquer Prelims. Currently, we are carrying out phase 4 of Conquer Prelims to help prelims aspirants who are preparing for the upcoming exam. So the phase 4 classes are taking place on the Unacademy app. We we have around 3 sessions going on per day at 12 p.m. and again at 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. So starting from today, I will be taking 3 sessions for international relations. You can see that on your screen over here. Today I'll be discussing all the important places that were in news because of international developments. A lot of map based questions will appear in the exam, so we will discuss this today at 6 p.m. Then tomorrow, I'll be covering all the important agreements involving India that were in the news over the last 12 to 18 months. And we'll also take a look at all the ongoing conflicts, the different developments with regard to wars and conflicts, the weapon systems that were in news, or any deals and agreements related to it. So these 3 sessions can be very, very important for prelims under international relations. So please ensure you catch these sessions live at 6 p.m. on the Unacademy app. You just have to go to my profile, search for the free classes tab, and you will be able to find these classes that are scheduled. So with this, let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 8, there's a very insightful article on the role of Pakistan as an international mediator. As we have discussed over the last few days, Pakistan has emerged as the unexpected mediator between US and Iran. The Trump administration has been reaching out to the Iranian leadership with a 15-point proposal to try and bring the Iran war to an end. And Pakistan is the one acting as a mediator between both the sides. And just yesterday, Pakistan hosted a very important meeting of regional powers. Pakistan had invited Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, and their foreign ministers took part in a consultation with Pakistan's establishment in Islamabad. It is also being reported that very soon Pakistan might host direct talks between US and Iran as well. So this raises the profile of Pakistan in global geopolitics. So it's important to understand what does this mean for India. First of all, we should learn why Pakistan is so keen to play this role of a mediator. What is Pakistan's interest in the ongoing conflict with Iran? Why US and Iran consider Pakistan to be a potential neutral mediator? And we'll also look at some very uncomfortable experiences in our history where India realized that Pakistan's growing global profile could detrimentally affect our strategic interests and security interests. This is something we'll break down in today's session. So, first, let's see how Pakistan has been able to project itself as a key power in geopolitics. See, since last year, the Pakistani leadership under Asim Munir, who has now become a supreme leader of sorts with the 27th constitutional amendment, along with the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, they have been warming up to the Trump administration since last year, and they very quickly realized that Trump can be convinced and attracted only through flattery by boosting his ego. So Even before last year's conflict between India and Pakistan, Pakistan had started reaching out to Washington and to White House in particular. Then during Operation Sindoor, all of us are aware of what happened. How US started claiming that it mediated a ceasefire. How Pakistan praised Trump's mediation efforts, even nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize, though India strictly denied any American involvement in the ceasefire. But after Operation Sindoor, some interesting developments took place. Within 1 month of Operation Sindoor, in the month of June 2025, Asim Munir gets a lunch invite from Donald Trump to the White House. Then Pakistan offered a critical minerals deal to the United States. Reportedly, it even offered strategic ports which could be accessed by US military. Then Pakistan even made crypto investments in firms owned by Donald Trump, which is effectively a bribe of sorts which was being paid. Trump family owns World Liberty Financial, and Pakistan's state and military establishment have made millions of dollars worth of investments. So through these moves made by Pakistan last year, the current leadership under Asim Munir and Shehbaz Sharif, they have been able to get closer to Donald Trump. Donald Trump considers them as favorable leaders, reliable leaders, and this is a big concern for India. In fact, during last year's 12-day war, when US and Israel bombarded Iran's nuclear facilities, US needed Pakistan to be on its side. That's one reason why Asim Munir was invited for a lunch at the White House just 1 month after Operation Sindoor, which means US was disregarding India's concerns and US was furthering its own interest by relying on Pakistan. Because US wanted to ensure that Pakistan will not come to support Iran in any form during last year's 12-day war when US and Israel were striking Iran's nuclear facilities. So you can see how the strategic alignment has grown between the current bunch of leaders in Pakistan and the United States. And if you also notice, with regard to the Gaza war, Pakistan has been trying to play an active role and it has very enthusiastically accepted the membership to the Board of Peace that is led by President Trump himself. And please mind you, the Board of Peace is not some state led, government led initiative. If you look at the structure and composition and its mandate, it's a personal initiative of Donald Trump, where Trump would be the permanent chairman. And countries which are invited, they need to contribute $1 billion in contribution and be willing to even contribute troops if necessary as part of the International Stabilization Force, which is proposed to be deployed in the Palestinian territories, particularly in Gaza, to help bring the conflict to an end, to reconstruct Palestine eventually. So Pakistan has been very proactive and enthusiastic to join the Board of Peace, and reportedly it has even offered to volunteer its troops to be deployed in Gaza as part of the International Stabilization Force. So all these developments of the past 12 to 15 months makes it very clear that Pakistan has been able to cultivate the White House. It has been able to get the blessings of Donald Trump, and this creates different and unique challenges for India. Whether we like it or not, the reality is that Pakistan has been able to rise its global profile thanks to the policies of Donald Trump. So this has serious implications for India. See, of course, India can't droop to the level of Pakistan. Pakistan is known to be a client state, sort of a dalal, always willing to place itself and trying to enhance its own profile by acting as a mediator or a middleman, right? It has been involved in even leakage of nuclear material, nuclear secrets in the past in a similar manner. When China was blessing Pakistan by sharing the secrets of nuclear and ballistic missiles program, Pakistan's establishment was busy leaking that in the nuclear market, in the black market, to rogue countries like North Korea, Libya, and the others. So Pakistan has a history of doing this. Even when US was looking to counter Soviet Union in Afghanistan in 1979, 1980, Pakistan willingly offered itself to train the Afghan Mujahideen, to radicalize the Pashtuns, and create a insurgency against the occupying Soviet forces in Afghanistan. So Pakistan is known to do this. It's known to exploit geopolitical opportunities. It'll go to any extent. It'll get ready to do anything in order to ensure that the military establishment, the deep state, remains relevant and remains prominent in the eyes of the global community. Now, this is where we need to understand why Pakistan is so keen to play a role in the Iran war. Apart from projecting its own influence, does Pakistan have any other interests? So, if you look at the meeting that was hosted yesterday in Islamabad, where the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt took part, it has become clear that Pakistan has been able to achieve some progress at least. These countries which participated, they all have a stake in the ongoing conflict in West Asia. These are some of the major powers that are from the region itself. And with Pakistan, they are hoping to work out a solution between US and Iran by pushing the 15-point plan that the Trump administration is offering to Iran. It's still not clear as to what are the terms of the 15-point plan, but most likely it will involve some sort of regime change. It will involve some sort of guarantees that Iran will stop posing a threat to US and Israel, that Iran would stop sponsoring the proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis against Israel. It would also probably involve commitments through which US and US based companies can access Iranian resources, particularly oil and energy resources. So that is what can be expected. But the fact that Pakistan is actively pushing this and even working with regional powers gives it more credibility. So let's understand why exactly is Pakistan doing it. Apart from gaining influence, there are other interests for Pakistan. It's not just about becoming a major player in geopolitics. It's not just about getting closer to the United States. Of course, that is one of the prime motive, but there are other motives as well, other interests for Pakistan. Now, when you look at the map here, those interests of Pakistan will become clear to you. See, don't forget, Pakistan shares a long border with Iran, and that too a very sensitive, delicate border covering the Baloch region. Just like you have the Balochistan province in Pakistan, the Balochistan region, the Sistan Balochistan province in Iran, they are ethnically and culturally connected. And if you look at the Baloch rebellion, how insurgent groups like Baloch Liberation Army have been fighting against Pakistan, it's believed that they get shelter across the border in Iran in the Sistan Balochistan province. Iran also accuses Pakistan of sheltering few radical terrorist sort of organizations which operate from Pakistan's Balochistan province to target Iran. In fact, over this controversy, Iran Pakistan have already exchanged military strikes back in 2024, where Iran launched missile strikes and drone strikes in the Balochistan region of Pakistan, and Pakistan retaliated with counter strikes on Iranian territory. So, the Baloch issue and the presence of insurgency, terrorism in the region, and both countries giving a safe haven for radical terror groups targeting the other country, remains a source of security concern for both the nations. So, Pakistan is obviously worried if the Iranian state collapses, if the war escalates. Baloch insurgents and rebels might treat this as an opportunity to step up the attacks on the Pakistani state itself. So it would be a right time for Pakistan to work with the Iranian regime and ensure that the threats are contained. So this is one of the prime motivations. Then second, Pakistan is home to a very large Shia population. See, Iran is the leader of the Shia power bloc. This map is showing you the distribution of Shia population across West Asia, and Pakistan plays host to a significant number of Shia Muslims. Studies indicate that anywhere between 10 to 20% of Pakistan's population are Shia Muslims. That explains why the US diplomatic missions, the consulate and embassy was attacked when the Ayatollah was killed by the American and Israeli strikes on the first day of the war. So Pakistan fears that if Iran's Shia theocratic regime were to collapse completely, this could even trigger an internal rebellion and lead to a new security crisis within Pakistan. Pakistan will have to deal with the fallout of the collapse of the Shia regime, which could instigate the Shias in Pakistan to rise up and target US and Israeli interests. And this could become a new security threat for Pakistan itself. Then there's another important reason. Pakistan will have to deal with any refugee crisis as well. If the war were to drag and continue for months together, it will most likely trigger a big refugee crisis and the burden will fall on Pakistan. And the overall instability could spill over into Afghanistan as well, where Pakistan is already at conflict with the Afghan Taliban regime. Then you have the TTP, Pakistan Taliban, which has been carrying out major attacks against the Pakistani state, which could get further emboldened by the instability that is prevailing across this region. So for Pakistan, there are direct security and strategic stakes. And that's one reason why Pakistan is so active in order to mediate this conflict. So one reason is it definitely wants to get closer to Trump. It wants to appease the United States and play a bigger role in global geopolitics so that it can use that advantage to try and undermine India. So that US will look the other way when Pakistan will continue to target India, focused on destabilizing India. I'm saying this because this is exactly what happened many decades ago. We have an experience with this. Back in 1960s and 70s, this was the exact same strategy Pakistan used to get closer to Western powers during the Cold War, used it as a leverage against India. And that is where the concern comes for India. That's why many opposition parties are also raising concerns as to what the Indian government is doing. What is our strategy to counter this? Of course, we can't droop to Pakistan's level, but India will have to think of the short-term and long-term implications. See, for US, Pakistan is acceptable as a mediator for several reasons. Because US has a history of working with Pakistan and using Pakistan as a client. Apart from that, you should know that Pakistan does not recognize Israel. Pakistan and Israel do not have official diplomatic ties, which makes it acceptable for Iran. Iran would not have accepted Pakistan as a mediator if, let's say, Pakistan had ties with Israel or if it had recognized Israel. So it has that equidistance of sorts between both the camps. And even the Trump administration is appearing to try and keep Netanyahu and Israel away from the talks. US realizes that any deal has to be directly between US and Iran without any external pressure coming in from Israel. So Pakistan would be the perfect mediator to keep out Israel from the talks, involve other regional powers like Saudi, Egypt, and Turkey, and US can strike a direct deal with Iran. So this explains as to why Pakistan is being considered as the perfect mediator for this conflict. Now, what is this historical bitter experience that I'm referring to? See, back in 1960s, in the late 1960s and early 1970s, India had dealt with a very, very similar situation. Many of you may not be aware of it. The then US President, Richard Nixon, and his national security advisor, Henry Kissinger, a very infamous duo as far as India is concerned. Because during the 1971 war, the racial discrimination of these two leaders against India was very evident. Their hatred against India, their hatred against Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and how they viewed India through a racial lens is something which is very well established through declassified documents of the White House, the State Department, and the CIA. Now, the point is, why did Henry Kissinger and Nixon hold an anti-India view, whereas they were very, very close to the Pakistani establishment, particularly to Yahya Khan, the then Pakistani general? So to understand this, you need to look at the Cold War politics that existed. See, China, that is People's Republic of China, which was established by the Communist Party of China in 1949, it was never recognized by the United States. Initially, US gave recognition only to Republic of China, that is today's Taiwan, and US maintained diplomatic ties only with ROC, not with PRC. The US had recognized the Kuomintang party under Chiang Kai-shek that ruled over Taiwan after losing the civil war in mainland China. The communists had driven out the Kuomintangs into Taiwan. So the PRC regime in China was not recognized by US, and for nearly 2 decades US and PRC did not have official diplomatic ties. And especially after China annexed Tibet in 1950, started committing human rights violations, US had kept its distance from the Communist Party in China. And it also was a result of the Cold War divide between the capitalist democratic countries like US and the communist states like China. But however, in late 1960s, it became a top priority for Nixon and Kissinger to create an opening towards China, to try and establish contact with the Communist Party, to engage with the PRC. This became a geopolitical priority for the American administration in the late 60s. Because, see, during this period, there were Sino Soviet tensions that existed. Within the communist bloc, tensions had come up between China and the Soviet Union. They had a standing border dispute, and there were ideological differences as well between Mao Zedong and the Soviet leadership in Kremlin. So, this was a perfect opportunity for the US to divide the communist bloc and try and pull China away from Soviet influence. And also, don't forget, this was the time when US was involved in another unnecessary war, a brutal conflict in Vietnam, where US was trying to back the democratic forces against the Viet Cong. And it was even trying to target Cambodia, from where the communist forces in Vietnam were getting support. So this war was dragging. It had become a war of attrition. US was suffering severe losses. It desperately needed an ally in Asia to try and end the Vietnam War and to exit this conflict as soon as possible. So who better than China? China is a neighboring country of Vietnam. If US were to woo China on its side, it could possibly use China's help to try and end the conflict and retain its influence in the region and exit this dragging war, which was imposing a heavy cost on the US. So that's why for Nixon and Kissinger, it had become a top priority to open up ties with China. For 2 decades, US-China didn't have much of diplomatic contact. Through official channels, the talks were not going forward. Right? Official channels had been tried, but it was not working out. The State Department in the US was vehemently against any engagement with China, primarily on ideological lines because of the Cold War divisions. But Nixon and Kissinger had a different idea altogether. They saw that if China can help them end the Vietnam War, and if they can exploit the Sino-Soviet divide and pull China away from the Soviet influence, they could weaken the communist bloc as well in the process and thus strengthen American influence. So to reopen ties with China, they needed someone to act as a mediator in between. First, US had proposed France, but China rejected the idea. Mao Zedong personally rejected France as a mediator because China wanted someone from a non-Western world. China would never accept a Western power as a mediator. So France was rejected by China. Then United States tried using countries like Romania from the Eastern Bloc, and it used the Warsaw Tract, working with some communist countries in Eastern Europe to try and maintain ties with China, to talk to the Chinese leadership. But this also did not work out because China did not trust these Eastern Bloc countries, as China feared that they could leak the communication details to Soviet Union, to Kremlin, which then would misuse that to target China. So this is very interesting. China, being a communist country, was not trusting other communist powers. So China under Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai was not willing to work with a Western mediator like France. At the same time, it was not ready to work with communist countries of the Eastern Bloc as well. So the only viable option here was Pakistan. Yahya Khan was very, very close to Nixon and Kissinger. They had a lot of faith in him. They loved him for some reason. Right? They believed he was a very efficient leader who could further Western interests. Because don't forget, during the Cold War, Pakistan had chosen a side. It had aligned with CENTO, a military alliance led by United Kingdom. It had no hesitation to join the Western military alliances. So Pakistan was seen as a reliable partner, and UK was also exerting a positive influence to create that image for Pakistan. And that brought Pakistani leadership much closer to the US. And at the same time, Yahya Khan enjoyed fantastic relations with Beijing, or Peking as it was known back then. Yahya Khan had direct channels of communication with Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, and the top leadership of the Communist Party. So it was Yahya Khan who facilitated the talks. In fact, there's a very interesting story behind this. In 1971, Henry Kissinger visited India. He came to Delhi and immediately followed this with a visit to Pakistan. But after landing in Pakistan, Henry Kissinger started claiming that he was having a stomach upset because of Delhi belly, because of having Indian food, that he had a stomach upset. But this was a lie. It was a cover story they were creating. Using this as an excuse, Henry Kissinger secretly ran away to China with the help of Yahya Khan. In fact, within the US government, their own officials were not aware of what Henry Kissinger was up to. State Department was kept out of it. US diplomats were not aware. They really thought Henry Kissinger was not keeping well. They created a window of around 64 hours where Yahya Khan organized a secret flight using a commercial flight of Pakistani International Airlines. And Henry Kissinger flew out of Rawalpindi to Beijing, met with the Chinese leadership, created an opening, and then this paved the way for visit of Nixon to China. The historic visit that completely reshaped global world order and reshaped the Cold War dynamics itself. So it all happened with the involvement of Pakistan and the mediation of Pakistan. So this had a direct impact on what was happening parallelly. Now, Pakistan under Yahya Khan was emboldened that they could do anything they want because they have the blessings of both US and China. Nobody would touch them, nobody would question them. This is what led Yahya Khan and as well as Bhutto to deny the election that was won by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and deny the rights to East Pakistan, which eventually turned into a genocide. On 25th March 1971, at the same time when US was relying on Pakistan to contact China, Pakistan launched Operation Searchlight, a deadly operation where Pakistani army with the Razakar militias committed a brutal slaughter of the Bengali population, eliminating nearly 3 million Bengalis over the next few months. This triggered a huge refugee crisis. India had to deal with the entire burden. Nearly 10 million refugees were pushed into India. It was up to India to deal with this entire crisis, and eventually it led to the India-Pakistan War of 1971. India decided to act not just on humanitarian grounds to help the Bengali refugees, but also use this as a strategic opportunity to break Pakistan. India started extending covert support through Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and the Mukti Bahini movement in order to create internal resistance within East Pakistan. Eventually, India fought a overt war and defeating Pakistan by December 1971, leading to the liberation of Bangladesh. But during this entire period of heightened tensions in South Asia, US was firmly on the side of Pakistan. It even pushed Iran, which was a puppet regime back then under the Shah, to provide arms supplies to Pakistan during the conflict. American fighter jets, F-16s, they were shared with Pakistan. US ammunition, arms, helicopters, which were with Iran, were loaned to Pakistan. Then US used its new ties, which were being built with China, to push China as well, to attack India from the other front, from the Himalayan front. The US was nudging China to open a new front against India to try and save its best friend Pakistan. US even went to the extent under Nixon and Kissinger to issue a direct threat to India by mobilizing its naval fleet, the 7th Naval Fleet, into Bay of Bengal to threaten Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. So the reason why we are exploring this part of history is because it shows what happens for India when Pakistan gets closer to US, when Pakistan becomes pivotal for American interests. There are many more examples like this. One reason why US conveniently ignored Pakistan's nuclear weapons program was mainly because to counter India. The Americans knew very well that China was leaking nuclear secrets to Pakistan. In a way, US wanted this to happen because they saw Pakistan as a counterbalance to a nuclear India. Or see what happened in Afghanistan, as I told you earlier. Pakistan again became a willing client state in 1979 1980. It worked for the CIA, engaged in America's covert war against the Soviet forces in Afghanistan, and it not only got funds and weapons from US and Saudi Arabia to raise the Afghan Mujahideen, but it got incredible experience in covert warfare. And it created strategic depth in Afghanistan by using the Mujahideen and later the Taliban to create anti-India terror groups. Pakistan created a direct link between Khalistan movement in Punjab and Kashmir insurgency and terrorism with the Afghan conflict. It even brought Mujahideen elements into Kashmir. It used the same terror infrastructure along the Afpak border to train and support Khalistani elements and Kashmiri separatists. And all the time, US ignored it. It looked the other way conveniently. Why? Because Pakistan was critical for them. So this is where India should prepare for the short to long term implications. Right now, Pakistan is indeed playing a big role for the US, and under Donald Trump, India will have to be extremely wary of this growing nexus between US and Pakistan, because this could blow back for India in different ways, in unexpected ways. So this is what we take away from the current developments, but let's wait and watch as to what happens in the coming weeks. So please take up this mains question for your answer writing practice. Now let's look at a very important editorial related to Indian economy. This article provides a critical examination of the UDAN scheme. See, the UDAN scheme, Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik, was launched as a priority initiative by the Modi government in 2016. The focus was to boost regional air connectivity by enabling low-cost air travel. The goal was to support the airlines, not just the large airlines, but even small state-level operators and low-cost operators, to connect tier 2, tier 3 cities, to improve regional air connectivity infrastructure, to operationalize old unused airports and airstrips, and reach the remote hinterlands of India so that better connectivity could be provided. So it's a very ambitious scheme which has produced mixed results over the last decade. So now the union government has approved modified UDAN. A new version of this scheme has been recently approved by the government. It was mentioned in the budget as well. And you see a major increase in the budgetary allocation for modified UDAN scheme. Right now, the government of India has set aside almost 28,840 crores in the current budget for modified UDAN scheme. So under modified UDAN, the goal is to extend the subsidies which are given to small airlines, low-cost operators who are flying on tier 2 and tier 3 routes. See, under the previous UDAN scheme, these subsidies were given for up to 3 years. When a low-cost airline like, let's say, Akasa starts a new route connecting two small towns or cities, or connecting one major metro with a small tier 2, tier 3 city, for these routes where demand might be less, government would subsidize that cost because operational cost is very high in civil aviation. And this subsidy was given up to 3 years. So under modified UDAN, the subsidy is being extended till 5 years. So from the previous 3 years to 5 years, we are seeing a big extension in the provision of subsidies to airlines when they operate on tier 2 and tier 3 routes. Along with this, the government is setting aside 12,000 crores to set up at least 100 airports and airstrips, to redevelop some of the old unused airstrips, and ensure that even small non-operational airports are brought back online. Up to 12,000 crores would be pumped into this infrastructure initiative. Around 3,600 crores will be spent on setting up helipads, 200 helipads across the remote regions of the country, particularly in central and eastern parts of India, northeastern parts of India, areas closer to the border regions, areas where economic opportunities exist. So 200 such locations are chosen where modern helipads will come up under the initiative. And the government will also bear the cost for operation and maintenance of the low traffic airports in the country, because you will have to staff these airports, pay them salaries, and pay for the maintenance cost as well. So this cost would also be borne by the government. And this is an incentive the government is giving to the airline industry, to the civil aviation industry, to start operating more flights on tier 2 and tier 3 routes. So the vision looks fantastic. In fact, the initial UDAN scheme has delivered some good results as well. Now, take for example how connectivity has improved to even small towns, let's say like Shimla or Aswal or Bagdogra, right? Even small locations have been well connected. Madurai, Coimbatore, Hubli, Mangalore, many such small cities which had barely used airports. Today they have decent air traffic and air passenger demand which is coming in, and the credit goes to the UDAN scheme because it has incentivized small airlines and low cost operators to run flights to these small cities and tier 2 tier 3 centers. But however, there are many shortcomings as well. The editorial is highlighting the shortcomings in UDAN and how lessons have not been learned for modified UDAN scheme. See, one major flaw is that the scheme does not take into account the high and unsustainable operational cost of civil aviation. See, no matter how much subsidies government provides, it can't be given forever, right? It's not sustainable in the long run. Right now, all the smaller flights which are operating to tier 2, tier 3 centers and remote towns and cities, they are able to function because government is bearing a large part of the cost. When you look at civil aviation, the cost per passenger is very, very high, which means small airlines cannot bear that operational cost. The fuel cost and the cost of procuring and maintaining aircrafts and the fees that they have to pay to airports and all the other related charges that come up. It makes it unsustainable for low cost operators and small airlines to continue operating on these routes. These are low density routes where demand would be less. See, generally, such aviation routes would do well if there is an economic necessity. Let's say two cities which are economically intertwined, where regularly on a daily basis people are moving around and no other alternate forms of transport is viable, right? There should be sufficient travel distance and travel time, and the cost compared to road and rail transport should also be comparable. Only then this plan will make sense. So, on some specific routes, this is a great idea, but on many other routes, this idea may not work. For example, you take Mumbai and Pune route. Why would someone take a flight when there is a good expressway connecting the two cities and you will roughly take the same time? Right? The cost could be comparable or much lesser. Same happens with the Chennai Bengaluru route or Bengaluru Mysore route or Chennai Coimbatore and Madurai route. Instead of taking a flight and wasting 4 5 hours, because even though the journey time is hardly 40 45 minutes or 1 hour, you'll end up spending a lot of time at the airport itself and reaching the airport and traveling back from the airport. That's an absolute waste of time, so it doesn't make sense. Plus, you have alternate modes like road and rail transport, which gives you convenient connectivity, high speed connectivity as well in some cases, right? There's a great expressway between Chennai and Bengaluru as well, a great expressway between Bangalore and Mysore. So these routes do not make sense. No matter how much subsidies you provide, no passenger would prefer to take the airlines because they have other routes of transportation. So blindly pushing UDAN scheme would simply drain the exchequer and subsidies would not be justified. You can't sustain it in the long run. So that's a very valid criticism being raised by this editorial. Because see, right now government says it's important to build last mile connectivity. That's why the government is focusing on small planes, unused airstrips, and helipads. See, this is the model you often find in developed nations. In large developed countries, especially United States, you will see that there are multiple airports. Each city will have 2 3 airports, right? Then even small towns will have an airstrip. So US has hundreds and hundreds of airports and airstrips. So there it makes sense because of the distance primarily, the time taken to travel, though there are alternate modes of transport, the distance and time plays a big factor, and people can afford the airfare. But that is not the case with India. Yes, affordability has gone up and the aspiration has gone up. Today, most people would prefer flights, especially for long distance commute. A flight from, let's say, Tiruvananthapuram to Bagdogra makes sense. Maybe there's a migrant worker from Northeast India. For them to go back home from Kerala to Northeast India, this long distance commute makes sense instead of journeying through road or rail route. Cost is comparable, the time would be saved. But it doesn't make any sense for shorter distances where the time taken is less and where there are alternate modes of transport. So, this is where the editorial is urging the government to take a relook at the scheme. It's a great idea to boost civil aviation infrastructure. It's a good idea to provide some sort of last mile connectivity through air transport as well. But it may not work on every route. It may not work for every airline. That is why the editorial is suggesting that the government should be very particular about selecting the route, selecting the airline, ensure that there is sufficient demand rooted in economic necessity. See, in some routes, there might be traffic only during festival season, holiday season, right? People would be traveling for tourism purposes, maybe, or migrant workers would be going back to their homes. But this is seasonal traffic. Now, you can't run flights throughout the year between these routes when there is no business sense, when there is no financial viability, right? That is why the editorial is suggesting the scheme can succeed if the government is very careful in selecting the routes, in selecting the airlines, and operating only where high demand exists. Without demand, providing endless subsidies will make no sense, right? It is not sustainable in the long run. And also, Indian consumers are price sensitive. There's a limit to the prices that can be set by the airlines as well. So these are the factors that the government should keep in mind as it implements Mission UDAN. So please take up this mains practice question. There can definitely be a question on this since a new version of UDAN has been rolled out in this year's budget. Now, moving on, another important article related to Indian economy. In fact, there are two articles related to Manrega and how it is being replaced by VB Ramji Act. So let's quickly explore the Manrega scheme, which is now being replaced by Viksit Bharat, Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission Grameen Act. By the way, please note who has written the article. The article is written by Jean Dries, who is considered as the architect of Manrega program. Jean Dries is a well-known thinker, teacher, and he's of Belgian origin, settled in India. And he worked very closely with the then UPA government under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. He was also part of the National Advisory Council, chaired by Sonia Gandhi, which advised the then Manmohan Singh government. He is seen as the brainchild of schemes like Manrega, and he is providing an assessment of what was right, what was wrong with Manrega, and he's comparing that with VB Ramji Act. See, Manrega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, that was rolled out in 2006, was seen as a flagship scheme of the then Manmohan Singh government. It promised guaranteed jobs in rural areas for rural households, and it played a very big role in increasing rural income and sustaining rural demand during a time of global turbulence. There's no doubt that during the 2007-2008 recession, when the global economy was tanking, right? India's demand was also falling in the urban areas. It was rural demand which sustained the Indian economy because the government was spending heavily trying to incentivize the economy. And one big incentive which was being given was through the wages that were being paid through Manrega, which was increasing household income in rural areas for Indian farmers. So it did play a big role and it has had a lasting effect. But however, Manrega scheme had several deficiencies and flaws in its implementation. See, the reason why Manrega was very popular initially was because of its wage rate, which was very high. When it was rolled out in 2006, rural population across India, they were very enthusiastic to seek work under Manrega because it was promising high wage rate. This is the critical factor to determine the very success of the scheme. See, under the Manrega Act, Section 6.1 says that the central government will notify the wage rates that will be provided. Right? Under Manrega, the state government which implements the scheme will work with local administration to identify local works which have to be carried out. Though there is a controversy regarding the kind of work that was done, because much of the work would be very regular manual work which had no value, long-term value. It did not create any long-term capital assets. But the point is, the wages that were being paid initially, especially in the first 3 to 5 years, was pretty high compared to the minimum wage rates. That is one reason why the rural population was more enthusiastic, especially when crops were failing, when adequate income was not being generated through agriculture. Rural households saw this as an alternate source of income, and on an average, a household was earning an additional 20 to 25,000 rupees per year. This even increased up to 25 to 28,000 rupees per year, which was a significant source of income for rural families. But the reason why the wage rates remained high is because for first 3 years, central government did not set the wage rate. Though the act says central government should notify the wages, central government did not do it until 2009. So until then, for first 3 years, the state governments were treating their minimum wages as the wage rate for Manrega. That is what Manrega Act provided for. Under Manrega Act, Section 6, Clause 2, it was provided that if central government has not set the wage rate, then for different areas, different wage rates can be set, which basically meant state governments can set their own wages. So states started using their minimum wages as the threshold to set Manrega wages. So what happened? Some states had very high minimum wages at that point. States like Uttar Pradesh, under Chief Minister Mayawati, they even doubled the minimum wages from 58 rupees to 100 rupees per day, which was quite attractive to the rural workforce back then. So as a result, Manrega became very popular. People were able to earn a decent income, an additional income. But the concern here was central government was bearing the entire cost. States were implementing it, but the wages are paid through the central government. So the fear was state governments will deliberately keep on increasing minimum wages so they can attract the voters by paying more wages through Manrega, whereas the bill is paid by the central government. But there was an opinion within Planning Commission, within the central government, that if they increase minimum wages regularly, then states will also bear the burden. Why? Because they will have to pay those minimum wages for other public works carried out by state governments at the state level. So that would be a natural counter to prevent states from unrealistically increasing the wage rates. So finally, the central government stepped in. By 2009, the center fixed a slab. It fixed a wage rate. But this wage rate did not rise significantly over the years. Especially after 2011-12 period, the wages did not see any real increase. The central government pegged the rise in wages to CPI, inflation for agricultural laborers, which meant the wage rates, they increased very nominally. And in many cases, it went below the minimum wages that states were promising. So as a result, farmers and rural population lost the interest. That enthusiasm was gone as the scheme was not properly implemented and the wages were not set accordingly. So when central government fixed this cap and did not allow any real rise in wages to happen post 2011-12, the enthusiasm and the interest started declining gradually. And when enthusiasm goes down, what will happen? Right? It will create an opportunity for officials to manipulate the system. Because when stakeholders, beneficiaries are not too keen and interested in the scheme, officials realize that there is no need for them to be very transparent about the scheme. The other issue was there was a problem with the payments. payments were delayed. Payments were not being made on time. It's not just about the wage rate, it's about the payments being made on time. See, in private sector, if someone does manual work, they get the wages paid on the same day. So they do the work through the day, and by evening they have the money in their hand. Cash is given to them. This always has value for people from the lower sections of the society. But when government implemented DBT, direct benefit transfer, Aadhaar linked payments began, directly depositing the cash into the beneficiary's bank account. This was done to reduce leakage and diversion of funds, to tackle corruption, which was a great move. But however, many payments got delayed and stuck, either due to non-authentication of biometrics or a delayed release of payments by central government. In many cases, the workers did not receive the wages on time. There were delays of weeks and months. So this led to frustration amongst the working population. Whereas if they work in private sector, do the same work for a contractor, they get wages paid on the same day, which they can use it. This is the same mindset of your cab drivers, for example. When you book a Ola or Uber, right? Why do you think they insist on you paying cash to them? Because they realize that money immediately. Even though the same money goes into their account later, of course, there is a commission which gets cut by the platform. But still, though the money is pretty much the same, most drivers prefer to be paid in cash. Why? Because they want the money to be seen immediately. Right? They have a day-to-day need to feed their families. They can't wait for a week or a month. So this delayed payment and the problems in digital benefit transfer, the Aadhaar linked payment system, this led to the lack of interest, and eventually it led to the lower enthusiasm for Manrega jobs. So as the workforce was not showing interest, some of the officials colluded with politicians and local leaders, and they started creating fake job cards. Right? With fake job cards, they started diverting the funds, and this corruption crept into Manrega, and thus it became an inefficient scheme over the period of time. In fact, one of the arguments of the current government to replace Manrega with VBG Ramji Act is that the scheme had become highly corrupt. It was only feeding some of the officials and the corrupt entities, as fake job cards had been created and the money was being diverted. That was one of the prime reasons. But the reason why corruption also increased is because people started showing less interest, according to the writer, because of delayed payments, because of lesser wage rates. And this created a right opportunity for the corrupt elements to create fake job cards and divert that money and enrich themselves. Now, when you compare this with VBG Ramji, has it made any improvements? Has it addressed these fundamental problems that were there with Manrega? The writer says that there is absolutely no change. There are no new constructive provisions, according to Jean Dries. He says that the wage rate under VBG Ramji is also very low, and it does not address the timely payment of wages. So even when it is rolled out and implemented, it is unlikely to solve the problems that were earlier faced by Manrega. It has been rebranded, projected as a new initiative, but according to the writer, it may not have the same impact because it is plagued by the same problems that Manrega had. In fact, there is a related article in today's paper which refers to this. Right now, state governments are worried because they are not giving any new work. So right now, the central government is still engaging in talks with the states for implementing Viksit Bharat Guaranteed Rozgar and Ajivika Mission Grameen Act. The rules are yet to be finalized. And don't forget, there is a funding ratio. Center will only pay 60%, states will pay 40%. Many states are opposing it. They don't want to incur the higher cost. So the talks are still going on. So right now, even Manrega is not being implemented, and the new VBG Ramji is also not being implemented. At least for the time being, the central government had given a guarantee that work will not stop, that Manrega work will continue for few months until the new act takes effect. But on the ground, it's being reported in this article that according to officials and workers, state governments have completely stopped Manrega work, and they're waiting for the consultation with central government to continue to get some clarity on the funding ratio on how to implement the scheme. Until then, rural population is out of work. They are not able to generate any additional income for themselves, as Manrega work has completely stopped and the new scheme is yet to be implemented. So these are the shortcomings or inefficiencies which have to be addressed on a priority basis. Coming to the next article, a very detailed article on India's supply chain disruption and how India can overcome the crisis. On page 7, there's this article written by the president of FICCI, where the writer is talking about supply chain disruption and its impact on the Indian economy. The West Asia war has added to the burden that India was already dealing with. See, since COVID-19 pandemic and since the Ukraine and Gaza war, supply chain disruptions have had an impact on the global economy. Plus, the concentrated nature of some critical supplies, like supply of lithium, copper, cobalt, and some critical intermediaries and raw materials, which is primarily controlled by countries like China, has already created a vulnerability for dependent countries like India. Now, the war in West Asia has created a much bigger disruption, with disruption of oil flow, gas flow, and other key raw materials, including urea, key intermediaries as well, which is having a big impact on Indian industry and the Indian economy. So, what can India do? What should be the idea for India to overcome any such dependency in the coming years? So, to understand this, first we should look at the impact. How does India get affected when oil prices go up, when oil gas supplies are disrupted, and energy prices shoot up? See, it's a well known fact that energy is the backbone of any country's economy, right? Any form of energy. And especially fossil fuel based sources, from coal to oil to gas, they are critical for any economy. It's a lifeline. Though countries are moving towards non fossil sources, clean energy, fossil fuel based sources still remain critical. And here, India has a major dependency, right? We import 85% of our crude oil, we import more than 50% of our gas requirement. So we have a major dependency, as a large part of it comes from West Asia. Now, whenever there is such a crisis in West Asia, whenever there is a disruption in oil supplies because of blockage of shipping channels like Hormuz Strait, or because of sanctions, because of wars and conflicts, if Brent crude increases by $10 per barrel, you know what is the impact on Indian economy? This can increase our import bill by almost 13 to 14 billion dollars. Every $10 increase in the oil price will increase our import bill by 13 to 14 billion dollars. Now you make the calculation, you do the math. Before the war started, oil had fallen to 59 to $60 per barrel. Now it is above $110, reaching $120. It has more than doubled. So for every $10, the import bill goes up by 13 to 14 billion dollars. So imagine the burden that will fall on the Indian economy. Imagine how it could affect the current account deficit and the balance of payments for India. And this will have a cascading effect, right? It can destabilize the macroeconomic factors. This can push up inflation by 30 to 40 basis points. And in turn, it can affect our GDP growth, drag the country by at least zero point 0.2 to 0.3 percentage points. India's GDP will take a direct hit for every $10 rise in the oil price per barrel. So if oil price has gone up by $60, $70, $80, you can estimate the consequences. Import bill could jump anywhere between 80 to 90 billion dollars, right? Inflation could move up at least by 1.5 percentage points. GDP could get dragged by at least 1 to 1.5 percentage points, which is a very, very significant impact. So this is where we need to understand the nature of India's imports. When you look at India's imports as a percentage of GDP, 19% is the share. The import to GDP percentage share is at 19%. So India indeed has a very high import dependency. Many of our manufacturing industries, right, they are heavily dependent on several imports. So what exactly are we importing? For example, if you look at the overall imports we are making, raw materials account for the highest share at 34%. Then intermediaries, which are used in industrial processes to make finished goods, they account for 31%. Capital goods like machinery, specialized equipment which is needed to make your products, this accounts for around 24%. And consumer goods, the goods that we directly import for consumption, is just 12%. Now, this is actually a good number for India because it tells you something very significant as far as our manufacturing is concerned. The good thing is we are not procuring a lot of consumer goods and finished goods. Out of our total imports, just 12% is consumer goods and finished goods, which means we are using the raw materials, the intermediaries, and the capital goods to produce goods in India. Right? That's what our manufacturing industries are doing. They're buying raw materials from others, buying intermediaries from others, and machinery and capital goods from others, and generating employment in India to use this to produce goods in India, to meet India's demand and even to export them abroad. So this tells you that when you look at the upstream and midstream levels in manufacturing, here we have dependency on imports, but we are pretty strong in downstream manufacturing. Because what we are getting in the upstream and middle stream, we are using it for downstream production. Raw materials fall under upstream bracket. Intermediary and capital goods, that includes your machinery and specialized components and equipment, falls under midstream category. So we are using this to produce the goods in India, which means we are pretty strong in downstream. So what we need is to reduce dependency on upstream and midstream inputs. Now let's understand this with an example. Let's take pharma sector. India is the pharmacy of the world. We are the world's largest producer of generic drugs and vaccines. But the key intermediary is your APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredient. We have a critical dependency on China with almost 60 to 75% APIs being imported from China. So it means our pharma is pretty strong in downstream manufacturing. We are producing a lot of drugs and vaccines, but there is critical dependency at the mid-level. Without China's intermediary APIs, our pharma will collapse. Now, this is a problem which can be fixed. How? You need a long-term strategy. You can't focus only on some areas. You need an overall holistic approach for the economy. We should identify each and every industry and sector, pick out the dependencies which are there, and try to build self-sufficiency. Try to become self-reliant. India needs to actively promote domestic production of APIs to reduce dependency on Chinese imports so that pharma sector can become more self-reliant. Then similarly, you take electronics industry, for example. India has several electronic manufacturers. So downstream, we are doing pretty well. But in the upstream and midstream, we have a lot of dependency. We do not produce sufficient semiconductor chips. We do not have access to critical strategic minerals. If you can secure them, then India can look at domestic production and thus reduce import dependency. Right now, we import chips and the raw material and intermediaries from Japan, from Taiwan, South Korea, China. Why not focus on domestic chip manufacturing by gaining access to the key raw materials? If you take energy industry, that's another example. See, oil, gas, we will continue to have this dependency, but we should step up domestic exploration. We have not fully explored our domestic potential. We should look out for new oil deposits, gas deposits. Of course, we are moving away to non-fossil sources like solar, wind, nuclear, hydropower, etc. But carbon-based energy sources will remain relevant. They will remain the backbone of the economy for many more decades. So India should scout for domestic deposits of oil and gas, try and reduce the dependency. We can't replace it. It's not possible. At least reduce the dependency. Right now, we are importing 85% of our crude oil. Maybe bring it down to 60%. Right? Right now, we are importing 50% of our gas. Bring it down to maybe 25, 30%. So identifying domestic deposits, increasing domestic exploration and production is critical. Along with that, create strategic buffers, create reserves in every sector and industry. You take agriculture, for example, right? For fertilizers, we need alternatives. You can't forever depend on urea, potash, which mainly comes from West Asian countries, right? Without urea, potash coming from West Asia and gas coming from West Asia, we can't make fertilizers. Why not explore other fertilizers, biomanure and organic natural farming, so that we reduce dependency on fertilizers? When you look at pulses and edible oils, we have a lot of dependency as we import a lot of pulses and edible oils. Why don't we boost our domestic production, reduce import dependency here? So, like this, in each and every sector and industry, we can create some amount of self sufficiency and reduce import dependency to some extent. So, that will insulate you against these external shocks and supply chain disruptions. Plus, creating strategic buffers and reserves for every sector, from fertilizers to electronics to energy sector to pharma, ensuring that we have adequate buffer stocks where import dependency exists will also help us overcome any supply shocks and supply chain disruptions. This is the key lesson that we can take from this article. Coming to the next topic, Iran has given a strong warning to the United States because, as I told you yesterday, though US seems to be pursuing talks on one side by using Pakistan as a mediator, it is parallelly making preparation for a possible ground operation. The signs are very, very clear. Open source intelligence sources indicate that US has mobilized thousands of fresh troops to the region. It's in the process of bringing fresh naval and air assets into the region. It has even deployed an entire marine expeditionary unit that specializes in amphibious assault operations. It has also brought in a large contingent of special forces, which means US is possibly looking at tactical insurgents of American Marines and special operatives, from Navy SEALs to Delta Force, where they will carry out precision operations, possibly trying to take Karg Island, which is the energy backbone of Iran. They might even try to take smaller islands near Hormuz opening to ensure the blockade is cleared. Or they might even plan operations deep inside Iran to take aim at the leadership of IRGC and the Iranian regime. So they will mainly rely on special operatives of the CIA, private mercenaries, or Navy SEALs and Delta Force. And marine amphibious units will also possibly plan a ground invasion, if not a full on invasion, a full on assault. Some limited operations at a tactical level might be carried out. So this will escalate the war, and Iran has said these enemy troops will be met with complete resistance from the Iranian side. Iran has even said if at all the war escalates, if US considers any such ground operation, then Iran will retaliate with more missile and drone strikes. It is likely to take aim at educational institutions and universities linked to Israel and US in the region. It will also take aim at oil, energy, and critical data centers, underwater submarine cables, and pipelines, and as well as financial and banking infrastructure. It has just yesterday carried out strikes on aluminum plants in Bahrain and other countries as well. These are major industrial facilities that are located in the Gulf countries. So if US were to carry out such ground operations and strike Iran's power plants and Iran's critical infrastructure, Iran also has promised a equal retaliation. So things are still heated up. Iran has even now denied that the talks are going on, but Pakistan says the talks are going well, that all the regional ministers from Egypt, Turkey, Saudi, they have been satisfied, and maybe very soon US Iran direct talks might begin. Next, one quick update. There's a good article on page 10 that refers to statements made by K. Vijay Kumar. Who is K. Vijay Kumar? K. Vijay Kumar is a legend in the IPS world, a very well known, very popular, known for his efficiency, ruthlessness, and his incredible expertise, especially in guerrilla warfare and counterinsurgency operations. First, he became popular in the hunt for Veerappan, the forest brigade, who basically tormented Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. He headed the STF. Though there were a lot of controversies surrounding human rights violations, Vijay Kumar was largely credited with the eventual hunt down of Veerappan. Then later, under the then Manmohan Singh government, he was appointed as the DG of CRPF to lead anti-Naxal operations, as CRPF was designated as the primary anti-Naxal force to supplement the state anti-Naxal forces. Later, under the Modi government, he was appointed as a special advisor to the Ministry of Home Affairs on internal security to mainly deal with the Naxal threat. So he is a specialist in counter-Naxalism or anti-Naxal operations. Right now, he is retired from service, but he has pointed out that all the previous governments deserve the credit with regard to tackling and weakening Naxalism in the country, especially the governments in the last 2 decades. See, in the year 2004, the biggest development took place with regard to Naxalism, where these left-wing extremist outfits such as PWG or People's War Group from Andhra Pradesh belt and MCCI, the Maoist Communist Coordination Center from the Bihar West Bengal belt. These outfits, which had been weakened by state police operations, they merged together. They merged various left-wing extremist communist outfits to form CPI Maoist. This is how CPI Maoist was born. And according to Intelligence Bureau, this was one of the biggest developments in our internal and national security, where multiple Naxal groups that existed before, they all fused and merged together to form one entity, that is CPI Maoist. Today, it's a designated terrorist organization under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So from 2005, CPI Maoist stepped up its attacks. Until 2009, it became a nightmare for India's internal security. Many of you might have heard of the deadly attack on CRPF at Dantewad in Chhattisgarh, where 76 CRPF Jawans were martyred. Right? This was one of the biggest attacks on security forces. So during this period, then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh correctly identified left-wing extremism as India's biggest internal security threat. And K. Vijay Kumar is referring to this very statement in this article. He says that after 2004, when CPI Maoist was born, India started dealing with a serious threat from Naxalism from 2006 to 2009, where Naxal attacks increased in Chhattisgarh and Odisha belt, around the Dandakaranya region. Then by 2009, PM Manmohan Singh rebranded the approach towards fighting Naxalism when he identified left-wing extremism as India's biggest internal security threat. Following this, the CRPF was given the lead role for anti-Naxal operations under then Home Minister P. Chidambaram. India ran several schemes to assist the state governments to fortify police stations and to step up the fight against Naxalism by bringing better technology and better equipped and better trained forces. For example, CRPF raised a special force unit called Cobra, Commando Battalion for Resolute Action, that specialized in guerrilla warfare and jungle warfare. Then CRPF and state anti-Naxal forces, they were modernized with better weapons, where MHA would reimburse the cost through the special expenditure scheme, revenue expenditure scheme, where MHA would bear the entire cost of police modernization in Naxal affected states. The district collectors in 200 Naxal affected districts were given discretionary funds so that they could spend this on improving transport and connectivity for the troops at the ground level. They could use it for fortifying police stations and security base camps. And under P. Chidambaram, with Manmohan Singh as the Prime Minister, Operation Green Hunt was launched as a covert operation under which CRPF with state forces and the Intelligence Bureau carried out targeted operations against Naxal leadership. So this had helped in substantially weakening Naxalism by 2014. So K. Vijay Kumar credits the previous government as well. Then he goes on to give credit to the Modi government, especially to National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, who revamped the entire strategy to fight Naxalism. See, right now, Prime Minister Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah have set a very ambitious goal to eliminate Naxalism by the end of this month. That is by tomorrow, 31st March. And India is very close to achieving the target. In recent months, most of the top Naxal leaders have been killed, eliminated. Many of them have been arrested. Many of them have surrendered. Even the mid-level cadres have largely given up the fight. India has broken the back of Naxalism. Much of the credit goes to the Modi government, definitely. As K. Vijay Kumar points out, Ajit Doval identified the need to train and recruit local youth, especially former Naxals who had surrendered, and train them as new operatives to be used in Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. See, this is a controversial area because previously, when such an experiment was carried out to raise a private militia by Chhattisgarh government called Salwa Judum, it had led to a lot of human right violations, and Supreme Court had struck down Salwa Judum as unconstitutional in the Nandini Sundar case of 2015. So following this, Salwa Judum had been disbanded. But now, India tried this approach but through a formal method where CRPF and state anti-Naxal forces, they raised new battalions using former surrendered Naxals, training them, arming them and equipping them, and used them effectively in anti-Naxal operations. One reason why today our fight has succeeded against Naxalism is mainly because of these district reserve guards who were formerly Naxals, surrendered Naxals, who were recruited into the forces, trained and equipped better, who fought against Naxals because they had better knowledge, better intelligence. Much of the credit goes to them, right? So K. Vijay Kumar says CRPF has done it in a very discreet way to avoid the judicial complications. And this has been large part of the success because of the support given by the National Security Advisor, the Home Minister Amit Shah, and the Prime Minister. In fact, he also refers to the minimal human right violations. He says most allegations that come up in Naxal area are false. According to K. Vijay Kumar, these allegations are part of psychological warfare of the Naxals to target the forces, bring frivolous charges on them, and to demotivate them, demoralize them. He says armed forces like CRPF are very professional and human right violations are bare minimum as far as anti-Naxal operations are concerned. He points out the role that CRPF has played in restoring governance, in liberating the areas that were occupied by the Naxals previously, and how governance has been restored in these areas. So that is a key lesson for us in internal security. He says that it's not just one government, one leader, it's about the overall approach of the central government in the last 2 decades, which has really helped India to fight Naxalism. Now, coming to the prelim section, let's quickly wrap up the session for today. On the supplement page, the Hindu carries this image of sperm whales, where you see this very rare and unique and special phenomena, where a newly birthed sperm whale calf is being supported by the females in the entire pod, where they help it to float and stay afloat because they don't know how to swim when they are initially born, right? So this image is captured near Dominica Island or Dominic Island as part of an ongoing study known as Project Site. This can come as a prelims question. Project Site is related to what? Project Site is a very advanced scientific research project. It stands for Cetacean Translation Initiative. Basically, researchers, marine biologists, AI experts, they are capturing the acoustic signals of whales near the Dominic Island, and they're using AI to understand the patterns, the echo patterns of the whales, to translate it into a human level understanding. So this is called Project SETI. It's a privately funded initiative. A lot of charitable, philanthropic, scientific organizations are funding it. And it's basically using the acoustic communication used by whales, particularly sperm whales. And by deploying AI tools, they're trying to translate this into a language where humans can understand as to what the whales are trying to communicate. Next, the same page has another interesting article, right? Please don't ignore the supplement page. It has a lot of science and tech related articles, environment related articles, which is important for prelims. This article refers to ex-RNA or extracellular RNA. Researchers have recently found out new details about how extracellular RNA functions, especially in bacteria. See, bacteria, once it is targeted by your immune system or by antibiotics or by a disinfectant, it is known to break up, right? Bacteria will die and the RNA material also gets completely damaged and discarded. That was the traditional understanding. But now, new research and study has shown that even after a bacteria dies and breaks down, either because of your immune response or because of antibiotics or because of disinfectants, the RNA material, some of the extracellular RNA material, it continues to thrive. It continues to remain in your body because they are shielded by a layer, a capsule, and your body cells are using it to communicate, to train the immune system. This research and knowledge will help in better understanding how antibacterials, antibiotics can work. It can help better understand the approach towards dealing with different diseases, including cancer. It will help in developing better disinfectants to deal with bacteria. Because the study has shown that extracellular RNA remains as it is even after the bacteria has died, because it is encased in a capsule so that it is protected from blood, urine, and enzymes, which otherwise would have broken up the RNA. So this is used by our immune cells to communicate from one part of the body to other, to train the body. So you can treat this as like a carcass or a dead material of the bacteria, which your own immune system is using to train other parts of the body how to identify this bacteria next time and mount a response against it. It will also help the bacteria to adapt and thrive in a way, right? It is also known to be linked with promoting cancer, as the movement of ex-RNA could result in the spread of cancerous cells as well. But it could also help in better understanding diseases and treating diseases, right? So that's a new breakthrough regarding how extracellular RNA functions. Now, coming to page 14, there's a very important article that mentions the port of Ust-Luga. See, Ukraine has been resisting the Russian invasion pretty well, and of late it has mounted major attacks on Russia's critical infrastructure. It's using cheap, low-cost drones very effectively, and it has been targeting Russia's fertilizer plants, airports, oil depots, and port facilities as well. So the other day, Ukraine has launched a major strike on Port Ust-Luga, which is a major Russian port that opens towards the Baltic Sea. This is a strategic port for Russia, which handles Russia's oil, gas, coal, and fertilizer exports. Because see, most of Russia's ports towards the Arctic Circle, they are all permanently frozen. It's very hard to carry out shipping through the Arctic seaports of Russia. So Russia's ports towards Baltic is critical because during summer months, the waters are completely free of ice. And you can also see the port of Primorsk, which is equally important. So please note down the location of these two ports, which are critical for Russian economy. Coming to the last article, on page 14, there's an article referring to Israeli police stopping the Latin patriarch of the Church of Holy Sepulchre from carrying out the Mass on Palm Sunday festivities. Palm Sunday is a very important event for Christians. And the site itself, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, is of great religious, spiritual, and cultural and historical significance. Now, where is this church located? And what is the importance of this location? See, in Old Jerusalem, which is at the very heart of the Israel-Palestine conflict, there is a place called Temple Mount. It's a mountainous structure. On top of it, three important religious structures are located, which is critical for Christianity, for Judaism, and for Islam. This is where you have Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam after Mecca and Medina. Right next to it, you have the Dome of the Rock, which is very sacred for the Jews. And on the western side of this compound on Temple Mount, you have the Wailing Wall, which holds a lot of significance in Judaism for the Jewish community. And it's in the same location that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is located, which is one of the holiest sites for Christians. It's believed that this is where Jesus Christ was crucified, later entombed and buried and then resurrected, thus making the site of great religious, cultural, spiritual significance for Christians. So please remember, Temple Mount in Old Jerusalem It plays host to all these important religious and cultural centers: the Al Aqsa Mosque, the Wailing Wall, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and the Dome of the Rock. So, on this note, I bring my analysis to an end. I hope you guys have understood all the topics. If you like the session, do press the like button, share the video with other aspirants, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.